Beatriz. A great pleasure and honor to join you all on this panel. Jimmy Carter is the only US president who I have had the opportunity of interviewing. So I'm delighted to share a few thoughts as a journalist about his record and perhaps the way the media treated him. I studied history at university, and Jimmy Carter is a fascinating example of how fluid history is. He's remembered, although there is some revisionism on this now, as being a one-term president who wasn't popular enough to win re-election at the end, and whose presidency was at the time widely considered to be unsuccessful. Some say he was unlucky, and the media obviously played a driving role in that. I, as a young man, aged only 18, I still have a vivid memory of that photograph that was taken in October 1979 of Jimmy Carter collapsing with heat exhaustion when he was running a 6-mile run. That photograph, traveled the world. Everyone thought he'd had a heart attack, and the photographs of him handing out the trophies at the end of the race were kind of forgotten about, and his physical weakness became a symbol of a failed presidency, if you like. But then, the pendulum swings in history, and so the media, I think, has also played a significant role in looking at how President Carter became the most successful ex-president, perhaps in American history, and that's the bit that I was fortunate enough to have a glimpse of. I met him, interviewed him 3 times. The first time, as Jenny mentioned, in May of 1989 in Panama, and then later in Nicaragua, and then more recently in 2016, talking about Panama. So the Central America, the impact that President Carter had on Central America, for those of us journalists who were covering, what was then, seems odd now, but then it was kind of the epicenter of US foreign policy. The Central America, all of the countries in Central America in conflict of one sort or another, and the United States greatly preoccupied about the spread of the possible spread of communism through the region. Seems kind of trivial today, but it was the big story of the day, as all of you on this panel will vividly remember. And for me, it was fascinating as a young journalist to see that up close. And yes, as Jenny mentioned, the Jimmy Carter's intervention in the election in Panama was crucial. May of 1989, we all know that Noriega had a candidate in that election who was unacceptable to most people, and the opposition had come together in a unified front and put up a strong candidate who won. And if Jimmy Carter hadn't been there and called out the election authorities, then who knows what would have happened. I remember as a journalist being stunned when President Carter gave a very brief statement after he had visited the election counting center and said, "This is a fraud." We had seen that running around the streets, looking at how voters were being prevented from voting in high propensity opposition areas, and evidence of ballot stuffing. And for Jimmy Carter just to say it as bluntly as he did, and then he obviously very quickly, scrambled to the airport to get out of the country before Noriega might do anything, bad to him. The impact was so devastating that I think it was that very same night or the next day that Noriega felt obliged to annul the election. He simply knew Carter's word was too significant and he couldn't get away with it. And as Jenny said, it was only a few months later. That was the very first election observer mission by the Carter Center, and it was only a few months later in 1990 when he did the same thing. Perhaps he didn't need to take on Daniel Ortega face to face, if you like, in a showdown, because he was able to quietly persuade Ortega behind closed doors, if you like, to do the right thing. And he reminded Ortega that he would have another chance in the future. And of course, we all know that Ortega took that. It took him a while to get another chance, but he took it. And then he, perhaps thinking back on that experience with Jimmy Carter, he decided he was never going to take that risk again, sadly. And that must have been Jimmy Carter didn't give up. Jenny didn't mention the numerous times that Carter tried to persuade Ortega to remember what he had done in 1990. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough, and we can't blame Jimmy Carter for that. You asked me, Beatrice, to keep this brief. Panama obviously is very much back in the news today. And I spoke to Jimmy Carter the last time in 2016 as Panama was completing the expansion of the Panama Canal. And he was incredibly proud of his legacy. He spoke with the highest praise for the manner in which the Panamanian authorities had taken over managing the canal. A lot of people were very skeptical that the Panamanians were up to the job. We all knew by 1999, by December 1999, that the Panamanians were very capable. They had basically been running the canal for 10 years by then, and they've proven it since. And I think it's worth remembering that when people talk about the U.S. retaking ownership of the Panama Canal today is or the Panama Canal, when it was originally built, is only half of what the Panama Canal is today, thanks to the expansion of the canal. It's a $5 billion expansion, which Panama paid for itself. Carter was hugely proud of that, too, that the Panama Canal had been built on and doubled in size by the Panamanians. So the United States doesn't own, if it owns anything of the Panama Canal, it's only half. Because that's the bit they built. And the canal today is a much bigger and significant operation than it was when it was originally constructed. And Carter was very aware of that and very proud of what the Panamanians have done. So thank you again, Beatrice. I'm very, very happy and honored to join you here today.
Thank you so much.